Hey guys, tonight we descend into the trembling beginnings of war, not between mortals, but between the sky and the earth, between fathers and sons, gods and monsters. You're not going to believe what leaks out of one angry god when he gets dismembered. The sky bleeds, the earth responds, and you're standing right in the middle of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into today's journey together. You trudge across a world still wet with myth. The stars above you aren't just stars. They're fragments of a sky god's mind, scattered like broken teeth. The wind? It's not really wind yet. It's Gaia's breath, steady, deep, and just a little bit angry. The earth has no cities, no temples, no humans yet. Just Gaia, the earth herself, and Uranus, her husband. Except Uranus doesn't hover sweetly above her like a gentle mist. No, he presses down, suffocating, possessive. Every night, he descends and blankets Gaia in his star-strewn weight, crushing not only her body, but also any children she tries to birth. He shoves them back inside her, deep into her rocky womb. Which, by the way, is not a metaphor. He literally shoves them back into the earth. You feel her pain, deep and low. It's not just childbirth gone wrong. It's the kind of cosmic claustrophobia that could curdle a mountain. You crouch low, beside a crevice. Inside you hear the groans of the first imprisoned beings, the Hecatonchyre's 100-handed giants and the Cyclopes. They're not ugly, they're unfinished. Like gods sculpted in a hurry, Uranus finds them repulsive. They're the children of both sky and earth, and they freak him out. One evening, well, not an evening, because the sun hasn't exactly been invented yet, but let's call it that for mood. Gaia finally says, "Enough." You could almost hear her voice in the soil beneath your bare feet. This ends tonight. She doesn't call on love or hope or forgiveness. She calls on vengeance. And her youngest son, Cronus, answers. Cronus is charming, in that hasn't blinked dash in dash 3 dash minutes kind of way. He's the kind of guy who sharpens a blade while asking you about your weekend plans. When Gaia hands him an adamantine sickle, cold, curved, impossibly sharp, you feel the earth tremble again. Not in fear, but in satisfaction. That historical fact you probably didn't expect. Sickles were actually one of the earliest known farming tools, used by Neolithic humans around 10,000 BCE to harvest grain. So yes, technically, Cronus uses a farming tool to harvest his father's legacy. Let that settle in. Anyway, Cronus waits in the brush, sickle tucked tight. His siblings silent, tense hide nearby. Uranus descends again, smug as ever, thinking, tonight is like any other. But this time, as he stretches himself across Gaia, she stiffens, then relaxes, then holds. And as Cronus leaps, the blade flashes. There's a sound that isn't quite a scream, and not quite thunder. It's like hearing the sky tear. Uranus reels back, but not before. Cronus slices clean through the part of him that made him a father. You don't see it fall, you feel it fall, splattering, soaking the earth. Now, here's where things get weird, because what kind of blood drips from a sky god? Not the kind you mop up. Each droplet that hits Gaia gives birth. From the foam and the soil and the anger come the Furies, 3 terrifying winged women who punish crimes of blood. From the moss and the gore come the giants, massive beings with raw muscle and serpent legs. And from the sea foam, where Uranus's severed bits splash, rises Aphrodite herself. Yes, the goddess of love literally comes from a celestial castration. Mythology's way of saying love and chaos are eternally linked. Here's the fringe tidbit of the day. Some pre-Hellenic versions of this myth suggest Uranus didn't just fall. He screamed curses so powerful they created whole prophecies. His scream is said to echo in caves around the Aegean still. Take that with a grain of salt or a mythological seashell. Historians still argue whether Cronus acted out of loyalty to Gaia or out of ambition for power. Either way, Uranus is gone. Or at least dethroned. His body dissolves into the cosmos. His voice fades into wind. The sky no longer crushes Gaia nightly. You'd think there would be peace. You'd be wrong. Because Gaia's new children, the giants and the furies, they weren't exactly invited to Olympus's family brunches. They weren't sculpted for tea parties or prophecy readings. They were born of rage. And rage doesn't grow old, it grows roots. You're still standing there, feet sunk into the squishy earth stained with god blood. When Gaia exhales for the first time in what feels like eons, it's not a sigh of relief, it's a calculated breath, like someone who just got the first move in a very long game. You glance around. The land is changing. Where once it was smooth, primal, and undefined, it now cracks open in places, swelling with the births of new beings. The giants are writhing into existence, half-formed and magnificent. Their eyes are too bright, their voices like shifting gravel. They don't speak your language, they speak earth, and the earth is not pleased. But let's rewind just a touch. Before the giants fully grow into their size 13 sandals of vengeance, we need to talk about Gaia's other plan. See, it's not enough to wound Uranus. That was only the beginning. Gaia knows that if she's going to make the universe safe for her children, all of them, she needs someone to rule. Not like Uranus ruled, with weight and silence, but with deliberate order. Or at least that's what she tells herself. So she looks at Cronus, her sharpest, boldest son, the one who didn't hesitate to swing the blade, and she hands him the crown, metaphorically. Of course, crowns aren't a thing yet. No metallurgy. No thrones either, just power. But you can tell when someone's wearing it. Cronus smiles. Not wide, just enough. You watch him press his foot against the scorched earth where Uranus fell and claim it. He says nothing, but you feel the shift in the air. He is now king of the cosmos. And Gaia, she waits. Watches, hopes. But here's the twist you should have seen coming. Cronus, newly empowered, is not the grateful son. He's not even the mildly obedient one. He's the kind of guy who, after getting a promotion, stops returning your texts. You trail behind him as he strolls across creation. He doesn't talk to Gaia anymore. Doesn't thank her. He builds his own power base, shaping time itself. Yeah, Cronus is Father Time, technically. He governs the flow of it, slows it down, spins it like thread. The Greeks eventually equated him with Saturn. If you've ever seen that creepy Renaissance painting of Saturn devouring his son, you know the one. It's this guy. Mainstream historical fact. The Romans inherited the myth of Cronus and renamed him Saturn, celebrating Saturnalia, a wild December festival of gift-giving and role reversal, which eventually influenced Christmas customs. So in a weird twist, the dude who cut off his dad's manhood helped inspire your secret sauna party. But anyway, back to the betrayal. Cronus gets paranoid. Probably because he knows what he did to Uranus. He suspects that his own children might turn on him the same way. So he makes a quiet, disgusting decision. He swallows them, not metaphorically. You watch him do it. One by one. His wife, Rhea, is horrified. She births Hestia swallowed, Demeter gulped. Hera down the hatch. Then Hades. Then Poseidon. It's not like Cronus has a giant mouth or anything cartoonish. He just opens, and they vanish. Divine infants, crammed into the guts of a god. You flinch. Even Gaia flinches. But she says nothing, because Gaia's not done watching her children make mistakes. Rhea, though. Rhea is done. She's not as showy as Gaia, not as ruthless as Cronus. But she's clever and weary. And when the sixth child comes, your old friend Zeus, she finally moves. She sneaks away, travels to a cave on the island of Crete. There, under the rhythmic bleating of a goat named Amalthea, and the banging of sacred shields by noisy warriors. Called Karets, to cover the baby's cries, she hides the infant Zeus. Meanwhile, she hands Cronus a rock wrapped in swaddling clothes, and he eats it. Because paranoia makes you dumb. Here's the quirky tidbit of the night. In later Roman myths, the rock Cronus swallowed was said to have landed at Delphi when Zeus forced him to cough it up. The Greeks even displayed a boulder at the site called the Omphalos, or navel of the world, claiming it was the exact one Cronus had digested. You can still visit it. Big O Leo cosmic hairball. Historians still argue whether Cronus's act of swallowing his children was a literal myth, a metaphor for the cyclical nature of time, or a symbolic warning about power-hoarding patriarchs. Honestly, probably all three. But here's what you really need to understand. By this point, Gaia is watching another one of her sons fall into tyranny. Again, she'd hoped to be free. But once more, her children are trapped, some in flesh, some in fear. And beneath the hills, deep below even the caves where the Cyclopes sleep, something stirs. It's not ready yet. But it's growing, because when gods fail, monsters stir. You kneel beside the edge of a hill where the soil pulses like a slow heartbeat. Something ancient is moving beneath you, not with malice exactly, but with the weight of memory. You're standing on the bruised skin of the world, and under it, Gaia's latest offspring, those born from Uranus's blood, are stretching their limbs. It's been quiet. Too quiet. Cronus is up there playing cosmic king, thinking he's outwitted destiny by eating his kids like bad leftovers. But what he forgets is that blood never disappears. Not divine blood. Especially not when it soaks into Gaia, because where Uranus bled, Gaia grew new life. You backtrack just for a second to that moment after the slicing. The earth turned thick and warm with celestial ichor. From the red-soaked fields sprang things not even Gaia could fully control. Furies, yes, those winged terrors who hunt murderers, sniffing out guilt like hounds. But more importantly, the giants. You crouch low as one of them stirs. It's not their size that hits you first, it's their silence. Giants don't burst into the world screaming. They rise slowly, as if remembering themselves. Their lower bodies are serpents, twisting around rocks and roots. Their torsos are massive, human-like, but exaggerated biceps the size of temples. Hands like slabs of mountain. You meet one's eye. And it's not hate you see. It's injustice. These beings weren't made for peace. They were made as answers. As reactions. As retaliation forged into muscle. And there are a lot of them. Now here's a fringe fact you probably didn't expect. In some pre-classical texts, the giants were thought to be the origin of earthquakes. Not metaphorically, but literally, they were blamed for tectonic rumblings. Gaia's sons shifting in their underground beds. In fact, the Greek word for giant gigantes comes from gi, earth, and genes, born. Born of earth, born of grudge. They are still growing. You walk among their half-buried torsos like someone moving through an orchard of sleeping titans. Some are coiled like springs. Some are fused to stone, waiting for the call. One, you swear, whispers to you, not yet. But soon. The thing is, Gaia doesn't tell them to rise. Not yet. She's waiting, watching. Again, she's gotten really good at waiting. You climb to higher ground and look across the mythic landscape. Cronus, unaware of the pressure building beneath his rule, continues on his paranoid path. Above him, the heavens begin to shimmer. Something's shifting, because Zeus is growing up. Down on Crete, he's no longer a squirming bundle of goat-fed giggles. He's tall now, and broad-shouldered, with storm clouds crackling behind his eyes. He trains in secret, not just with brute force, but with cleverness. He learns the stories, learns what his father did, learns that he's destined not just to challenge Cronus, but to unravel the whole cosmic mess his family's been weaving. And one day, quietly he leaves the cave, He doesn't come alone. With him are echoes of prophecy. Gaia's whispers, the silent nods of the Carites, even Amalthea's final bleat, all guiding him toward his moment. You follow him north, toward the heart of Cronus's kingdom. There, disguised as a servant, Zeus enters the court. He mixes a potion, nothing fancy, just mustard, wine, and a bit of divine something, and slips it into Cronus's drink. And then, Cronus vomites. Not just his lunch. He vomits his children, one by one. The gods return, fully grown and radiating vengeance. First Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, then Hades, and finally Poseidon. They emerge not with gasps but with grim nods, like warriors returning from years inside a prison of flesh. Cronus stumbles back. He knows what's coming next. You can see it in his eyes. The reckoning, historical sidebar. The ancient Greeks weren't squeamish about personifying chaos through family dysfunction. Many of their myths operate like divine soap operas with sharper weapons. This one, children reclaiming their stolen birthright, is essentially an ancient prototype for every coup d'etat story in human history. From Julius Caesar's Rome to Shakespeare's King Lear, the echoes of Cronus's downfall ripple forward. Now, here's a funny little aside. There's a lost play by Euripides, Cronos, that supposedly ended with Cronus begging to be turned into a beast rather than face punishment from his sons. A fragment suggests he gets his wish and becomes a crow. Not very dignified, but poetic justice is rarely subtle. Historians still argue whether Cronus's regurgitation scene was meant to show divine justice, natural rebalancing, or just a dramatic way of establishing Zeus's supremacy. Either way, it worked. Zeus and his siblings are ready. Cronus is not. And you? You feel the ground rumble beneath your feet again, not because of the gods, but because the giants heard the call. They don't rise yet. Not fully, but they stir. And Gaia? She's smiling again. You're perched now on the shoulder of myth itself, figuratively, of course, watching the earth prepare to crack open. The sky has changed color. Not in some dramatic thunder and doom way. No, it's subtle. A strange stillness. A barometric tightening. The kind of air that makes your skin prickle and your hair suddenly know things before you do. The giants are waking up. Not all at once. Not in unison like soldiers. But you can feel them shifting under mountains, blinking inside volcanic vines, flexing under riverbeds. You hear boulders groan as if being whispered to. Somewhere nearby, a serpent-legged colossus lets out a long exhale like a cello string being plucked by fate. But it's not their time yet, because up above, another storm is building. Let's take a peek. Zeus, now the new hotshot of Olympus, isn't just sitting back and sipping nectar. He's rallying. The gods are forming something we'd almost call a government, if by government you mean a constantly squabbling group of immortals with unlimited power and zero work life balance. But Zeus? He's focused, driven, maybe a little terrifying. You wander the cliffside near Mount Olympus, watching the gods hone their abilities. Hades perfects his knack for shadows. Poseidon learns to speak in tremors. Hera sharpens her stare into a political weapon so potent it could slice iron. They're not a family. Not really. More like a league of former hostages with something to prove. And Cronus? Well, he's not taking his defeat lying down. The Titans, his siblings, the older gods, have watched this drama unfold like aging rock stars seeing a new band rise. Some of them scoff. Some of them sulk. And some, led by Atlas, Hyperion, Khus, decide to fight back. Welcome to the TITANOM. ACHY. 10 years of war. Not metaphorical war. Not political tension. Actual mountain flinging, sky shaking, forest incinerating. War. The kind of war that splits myths into epics. You step onto the battlefield and feel history unfold under your sandals. Everything is too big here. The trees are constantly on fire. Lightning doesn't strike at hunts. The ocean hurls itself onto land just to join the brawl. Even time seems to hiccup. You swear you see a moment stutter and replay, like reality. Buffering, the Titans hold their ground. They have age, power, and size, but they don't have momentum or loyalty. The gods? They're raw but united. Young blood and lightning makes for excellent morale. And then there's Gaia. She doesn't pick a side this time. Really. You watch her lean back into the shadows of the earth, her fingers entwined with root systems, her expression unreadable. Because here's the quiet truth, she's not rooting for anyone anymore. She's just watching who makes the bigger mistake. Now, here comes your mainstream historical fact. The Greeks likely absorbed much of the titanomachi from earlier Indo-European storm god versus chaos serpent myths. Variations exist in Hittite, Vedic, and Mesopotamian cultures. Zeus versus Cronus is just the Mediterranean remix of a cosmic playlist humanity's been looping for millennia. During the war, Zeus releases the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires from their prison inside Gaia's belly, the same ones Cronus once imprisoned. And in return, Cyclopes forge him thunder and lightning. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands, begin hurling boulders like they're throwing tantrums. One Hecatonchire picks up 3 entire mountain ranges and juggles them mid-air before smashing them onto a Titan's head. You flinch. Not because of the violence, but because Cronus still doesn't understand what's happening. He still thinks this is about keeping power. He never realizes it's about changing rules. The gods win, of course. Eventually, they don't kill the Titans. That'd be too clean. They bury them deep. Far. You descend into the chasms where they're entombed. Tartarus. It's not hell. It's worse. It's silence, stillness. Imagine being sealed in a cosmic vault, hearing the world carry on above you, knowing you are forgotten. That's their fate, except for Atlas. Zeus gives him a special job, holding up the sky, forever. No backstory, no overtime pay, just eternal celestial weight training. Bit rude, but hey, Olympian justice isn't known for its nuance. And what about the giants? They're still watching, still growing, still waiting for a crack in Olympus. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some later myths claim the giants didn't grow at all until the titanomachi ended. And did they begin absorbing power from the earth like living batteries? Supposedly, if you walk barefoot on certain Aegean islands during solstice, the ground hums faintly with their breath. Historians still argue whether the titanomachi was a metaphor for generational rebellion or a symbolic record of actual political revolutions among ancient tribes. Either way, one thing is clear. The gods have won, but no one's really safe. Not when Gaia's patience is long, not when blood seeps deep, not when giants dream under your feet. You wake, figuratively speaking, to the low, steady pulse beneath the world. It's not thunder, not war drums, it's breath. Breath so slow and ancient that you don't recognize it for what it is until you realize it's matching your own. Inhale, pause, exhale. The giants are alive, and they're remembering. Above ground, Olympus glitters. The gods have rebuilt. You glance up and catch the shimmer of polished marble, the scent of ambrosia on the wind, the sound of immortals bickering about whose temple should be taller. Zeus is smug. Poseidon sulks. Hades, bless him, has gone full introvert, holed up in the underworld with his new dog. You'd think the story's over, but then again, you know better. Down below, roots twist. Not plant roots, idea roots. Memory roots. Every time a mortal whispers a myth, every time a priest makes an offering, the giants stir. Because they weren't just born of Uranus's blood. They were born of betrayal, of rage unmet. They carry not only strength but grievance, and that's fuel. You wander toward Phlegra, the battlefield yet to be. A stretch of volcanic land scarred and humming. Locals avoid it, say it smells like copper and old thunder. The myths say it's where the earth will open again, where the old feud reignites. But that's still coming. Right now Gaia is watching ... but she's no longer passive. You feel her shifting her weight, coiling beneath the land like a giant cat preparing to pounce. The Titanomachi showed her something. Her children cannot rule without repeating the wounds of their fathers. So now, she's going to try something else. She whispers to the giants, and they listen. They don't rise immediately. There's no dramatic burst through the crust, no geysers of magma. Just awareness, the kind that simmers. You peer into a mountain crevice and see two eyes blinking in the dark, massive, golden, amused. He sees you. But he's not ready. Yet. Now, here's your historical gem. Many Greek geographers, including Strabo, claim that the volcanic formations around Sicily and the Aegean Islands were physical remnants of the Gigantomachy, the war between the gods and the giants. Giant bones were discovered throughout antiquity, usually mammoth or dinosaur remains, rebranded by locals as proof of myth. Giants, they believed, weren't stories. They were history buried in stone. Zeus, of course, knows something's coming. He always does. Prophecies cling to him like static. You catch him pacing the edge of Olympus, thunder twitching in his fingers, eyes scanning the horizon like a CEO waiting for the next lawsuit. He doesn't tell the other gods. Not yet. Maybe he thinks he can handle it. But here's the difference now. The gods are no longer untouchable. Cronus taught them that kings fall. The giants? They don't want to rule. They want to rewrite. You flash back to the moment of Uranus's fall, the sickle, the blood, the roar, and realize this whole thing has been one long echo. Gaia's wounds never healed. They just got smarter. So what are the giants waiting for? You keep asking yourself. But as you descend again into the cracks, you pass Heracles training in the distance, unaware he'll one day be called in to tip the scales. You pass a sleeping hill that hums louder when you touch it. The giants are waiting for permission. Gaia's not just a goddess. She's a strategy, a long game. A chess player who lets others take the board while she arranges the floor beneath them. And she's decided it's not time yet, but soon. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Orphic traditions, Gaia's blood was believed to be capable of reanimating the dead, not as zombies, but as truths. Stories reborn in physical form. These versions say that the giants aren't simply warriors. They're reminders of cycles, of mistakes, of the things buried that still breathe. Historians still argue whether the Gigantomachy was a tale meant to justify Olympian rule or a veiled warning about what happens when power is inherited without reflection. Either way, you feel it, don't you? The ground isn't settled. The gods are uneasy, and beneath it all, the giants are flexing in their sleep. You shift your weight as the wind changes. It's subtle, just a ripple in the grass, a low groan from the stones, but it carries something ancient. The kind of energy you feel in your bones before your brain has a chance to catch up. Something's waking, and it's not just the giants. It's Gaia. She's stirring again. Not with screams, not with fire, but with purpose. You've seen her wrath before, when she gave Cronus that sickle. You've watched her patience when he failed her. And now she is done waiting, because Cronus has crossed a line. Let's rewind a bit. After Zeus and his siblings rose from Cronus's belly like divine refunds, there was a period of uneasy silence. Not peace, just silence. But Gaia's roots are deep, and they don't miss anything. When she hears what Cronus has done, swallowing his own children to escape fate, her fury reawakens. This wasn't justice. It was cowardice. And Gaia hates cowardice. So she begins again. You step carefully across a high ridge and watch as the earth hums under your feet. The giants have not been summoned yet, but Gaia is preparing the stage. She isn't impulsive, no. Her revenge moves in geological time. It doesn't roar. It rumbles. But here's the kicker. Cronus doesn't even know he's being watched. You trail him now, broken, humiliated, hiding somewhere in the folds of existence. Some say Zeus cast him into Tartarus. Others say he was exiled to a forgotten corner of the cosmos. And in some fringe Orphic tales, he's imprisoned in a dream, looping through his betrayal over and over again. That's your quirky fact of the day. In one obscure myth, Cronus is bound in a dreamlike sleep by Zeus, unable to wake, speak, or even age. His punishment isn't fire or chains, it's stagnation. Eternal uselessness. The Greek version of being ghosted by reality itself. Meanwhile, Gaia is not stagnant. She is planting. Her rage becomes seed, her grief becomes soil, and her children, the giants, are the fruit. This is not a battlefield. This is a garden of fury. You move among the roots where faces peer out of tree bark. One whispers to you, not yet, but soon. And that's when you realize Cronus was never Gaia's only target. Because the gods? They're not doing much better. Zeus is king now, but he's not ruling. He's controlling. Ever since he dethroned Cronus, Zeus has grown a bit. Well, Cronus, why? He demands loyalty, punishes defiance, marries his sister. Classic god stuff. And Gaia sees it. She watches as Zeus launches storms at mortals who question him. How he punishes Prometheus for giving humans fire. How he swans around Olympus, flexing his thunderbolts like some divine influencer with control issues. So what does Gaia do? She sends a sign. From deep within the earth rises a whisper. Balance. You may not hear it, but the giants do. One of them stirs in a place that doesn't exist on any map. His name, Alcyoneus. He opens one eye, just one. And with it, a mountain splits. Alcyoneus is the prototype, massive, immortal within his homeland, a blend of raw nature and divine resentment. His heartbeat alone is enough to drive cattle mad. His breath wilts olive trees, but he doesn't rise yet, because Gaia is playing smarter this time. Here's a historical fact to chew on. The Greek gigantomachy myth didn't become popular until the classical period, especially during the 5th century BCE. That's when the Athenian Empire began sculpting and painting vivid scenes of giants battling Olympians on temple friezes. Scholars believe these stories mirrored real-world tensions, city-states versus tyrants, democracy versus divine authority. Myth became propaganda with really excellent abs. Historians still argue whether Gaia intended the giants to destroy the gods or simply remind them, a kind of divine audit. A cosmic slap on the wrist that escalates into war only because Zeus can't take criticism. But the real question is, who deserves to rule? Zeus is no longer a boy in a cave. He's the king of the sky, yes, but he's also started to ignore the ground beneath his feet. And when the gods forget the earth finds new champions. Giants. You place your hand on the ground and feel them now, shifting slowly, deliberately. They're not just waking. They're listening. And Gaia? She started whispering names. One of them is yours. You stand at the edge of a cave, not just any cave, the cave. The one where Zeus was hidden and raised. The one where goat milk and clashing shields drowned out the sound of infant rebellion. And as you lean against the cool stone, you realize, this is where it all began. And quietly, where things started to go wrong. Zeus had every chance to be different, and yet, you look up. Olympus gleams above the clouds, a marble mirage of perfection. To the mortals far below, it's the seat of justice, order, celestial greatness. But to those who know better like you, it's just another throne, held by someone who forgot what it means to kneel. Because while Zeus rules the skies, the earth remembers. And Gaia has not been idle. She's nurturing. Plotting. And her giants? They've started dreaming in full sentences. You travel through arcane fissures, now tunnels carved by myth, not by geology. Beneath mountains, across fault lines, past molten pools that whisper secrets in languages older than speech. You step carefully as your foot lands on something soft, moss, maybe. Or a knuckle, a hand stirs beneath the soil, not attacking. Just checking. Because the giants aren't monsters. That's the mistake the Olympians will make. The giants are symptoms. They rise only when the balance is off. And Olympus these days is tipping dangerously. Zeus's rule has shifted. Once he sought justice for Cronus's crimes. Now he issues punishments preemptively like thunderbolts shot into stormless skies. You watch him silence dissent with divine force, reduce rebellious kings to ash, curse cities that worship wrong. He's turned Olympus into a glowing cage. And the other gods into whisperers. Hera clenches her fists in private. Poseidon avoids meetings. Even Athena, usually Zeus's ride or die, has started sketching maps of strategy under the table. And Hades? He watches from below, not liking what he sees. After all, when heaven misbehaves, hell gets crowded. But Zeus doesn't see it. Or won't, because here's a cheeky truth. Once you've wielded lightning, you start thinking you are the weather. Here's your historical anchor. For today, many scholars point out that Zeus's increasingly autocratic behavior mirrors the evolution of Greek kingship and tyranny, particularly in the city-states. The gods reflected the rulers of the day, noble at first, but over time, increasingly absolute. Myths like these weren't just bedtime stories, they were editorial cartoons. With explosions. So Gaia does what Gaia does best. She adjusts. She leans into the cracks between the Olympians' egos, sends small tremors through sacred groves, whispers in the dreams of oracles, encourages those who've been quiet too long. And one day, she calls Alcyoneus, the first giant steps fully into the world. It's not an eruption. It's a statement. Alcyoneus is taller than prophecy. His eyes are like storm-swallowed mountains, and his breath carries the scent of buried ages. He walks out of the hills of Thrace and takes a deep, patient breath. Birds drop from the sky. Wolves flee. A shepherd nearby tries to speak, but forgets his own name, because this is no soldier. This is reclamation. Zeus senses it immediately, and for the first time in centuries, he hesitates. You stand on a cliff watching him marshal the gods. His expression is unreadable. Not fear, never fear, but a kind of divine calculation. He thought he was past the age of revolts. He thought the Titans were the last, but he forgot one thing. The earth never runs out of children. And Gaia? She's got a lot of catching up to do. Here's your quirky mythic footnote. In some lesser-known versions, Alcyoneus isn't just the strongest giant, he's immortal as long as he stays in his homeland. Which is why, later, Heracles is told to drag him out of Thrace before fighting him. Gaia doesn't just create her warriors. She anchors them. Historians still argue whether the rise of the giants was originally a separate myth folded into Olympian propaganda, or whether it was always meant to follow the Titanomachi like a sequel with a better villain and higher stakes. Either way, what you know now is simple. The first giant has risen, Zeus has noticed, and Gaia is just getting started. You descend into a valley where the mist clings low, curling around your ankles like memory. The earth here breathes. Not metaphorically, actually. You feel it in the solace of your feet. A rhythmic inhale-exhale, as if the hills themselves are stretching awake after a long, bitter sleep. This is where they wait. The rest of the giants. It's not just Alcyoneus anymore. No, that was the spark. Now the forest is buzzing with names that should never be spoken too loudly. Porphyrion, Enceladus, Ephialtes, Clytius, Mimas, each one towering, coiled with fury, and born of the kind of divine trauma that doesn't heal with time, it festers. Slip past a crag where Porphyrion rests, back pressed against a cliff face. He is half shadow, half serpent, all vengeance. His voice, when he speaks, is like thunder underwater. He will burn like the others. You assume he means Zeus. You assume correctly. The giants are not plotting. They don't need to. Gaia plots for them. And now, she whispers more frequently, her voice riding the currents through underground rivers, into the marrow of mountains. You press your ear to the ground and hear it, not words, but urgency. Because Olympus is getting sloppy. The gods, in their marble palaces and golden halls, have become distracted. Dionysus is drunk. Ares is constantly rehearsing speeches no one asked for. Hermes is running from island to island delivering nonsense and collecting trinkets. And Zeus? Zeus is bored. And boredom, in a king, is always a dangerous thing. To amuse himself, he starts picking fights with mortals again, hurls curses, transforms lovers, floods cities on whims. The old habits return with new cruelty. Even Hera watches from her throne with a tight-lipped weariness. You can feel her resistance under her regal surface. Olympus isn't a council anymore, it's a performance. And the audience is growing restless. You sit quietly in the branches of an olive tree, near Delphi, where a mortal priest begins to weep during a prophecy. His voice cracks, the earth will rise. The golden halls will crack, the children of blood will answer. He doesn't know what it means, but you do. Here's your mainstream history bit. Delphi, the sacred sanctuary of Apollo, was believed to be the navel of the world, the exact center of the earth. And in many early oracular traditions, Gaia herself was once the original deity of Delphi, long before Apollo moved in. So in some ways, these new prophecies, they're homecoming messages. Meanwhile, in the underworld, even Hades has started pacing. He can feel it deep in the riverbeds of the Styx. Souls tremble. The order of things feels inverted. He's never liked Zeus's arrogance, but what's coming? What Gaia is preparing? That terrifies even him. And you? You cross a dry basin where the ground is fissured and warm. You step lightly, not because you're afraid to fall, but because you're afraid to wake what's underneath. Don't have to wait long. Enceladus cracks through a nearby peak, just a shoulder. Just a glance, but enough to darken the sky for miles. He does not roar, he just smiles. Because the sky is watching, and he knows it. He flexes his fingers once, and a lake evaporates. Here's your quirky tidbit. The Greeks believed that volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, especially in places like Sicily, were caused by the movements of giants trapped underground, specifically Enceladus. Mount Etna, in fact, was said to sit on his chest, so every time it rumbled, that was Enceladus turning in his sleep. Historians still argue whether these myths were invented to explain natural disasters, or if the disasters inspired stories to give shape to existential dread. Maybe both. Maybe that's what myths do: translate terror into narrative. Back on Olympus, Zeus finally speaks the words you've been waiting for. He gathers the gods. Thunder curls behind his tongue. They rise. And in that moment, you realize something chilling. He doesn't sound angry. He sounds excited. Because Zeus, for all his flaws, is still the god of storms, and storms need something to break. So Gaia, hearing the echo of her old enemy's voice, rolling through the heavens, finally speaks through her giants. Not in whispers, but in commands, and the ground answers. It opens, and what rises next is not just muscle and fury. It's reckoning. The crack runs from horizon to horizon, a jagged tear in the skin of the earth. You stand at its edge, peering into the abyss, and for a second you think it's empty. Just darkness, just a gaping wound. Then the ground trembles. Not violently, not yet. Just enough to remind you who's home. They're rising, all of them now. Porphyrion, taller than trees, emerges in slow motion, coils of earth and fire wrapping around his limbs. Enceladus follows, dragging a chain of smoldering rocks behind him like a cape. Mimas, the quiet one, rises with eyes like dying stars. Each one different, each one terrifying in a different flavor, and each one filled with the kind of rage that doesn't come from anger, but from generational memory. They're not marching. They're reclaiming. You step aside as Ephialtes claws his way out of a mountain. His first act is not to roar, but to listen. The sky above growls, already cracking with Olympian thunder. But he doesn't flinch, because the giants didn't come for war. They came for balance. You follow them east, where the sea pulls away from the shore, exposing black sand and ancient bones. Poseidon is stirring, his trident already humming. He knows they're coming. He can feel the vibrations rippling through the oceans like drumbeats. And on Olympus, the gods assemble. Zeus stands at the highest peak, lightning threading around his arms like serpents. Behind him, Hera, grim as always, Athena, already armored. Ares sharpening his spear with a manic grin. Hermes, of course, is nowhere to be found. You can almost hear him muttering, "Hard pass." Even Artemis and Apollo stand in uneasy silence. Because what's coming isn't just another Titanomachi. It's bigger, meaner, older. The Gigantomachi has begun, and the world knows it. Trees wilt in anticipation. Rivers reverse their course. Animals flee without direction instinct, overriding everything. In a temple somewhere, a priestess screams during a sacrifice and drops dead. No one touches her body. Even the mortals know. Something primal has come home. Here's your historical anchor. On the frieze of the great altar of Pergamon, built in the 2nd century BCE, artists carved a sprawling, brutal depiction of the Gigantomachi. It shows gods and giants entangled in violent beauty, twisting limbs, flashing eyes, serpents used as weapons. It wasn't just art, it was a political statement. A declaration of divine order crushing chaos, or perhaps justifying its own violence. But let's return to the battlefield. The giants strike first. Porphyrion launches himself toward Olympus like a comet made of muscle. Zeus reacts instantly, flinging lightning faster than thought. It slams into Porphyrion's chest and does nothing. Why? Because Gaia made him immune. Zeus's jaw tightens. He remembers now. The old prophecy, the giants cannot be killed by gods alone. It will take a mortal. Cue the twist. You turn, just in time to see Heracles appear. Not yet a god. Not fully human either. Caught somewhere in between, sweaty, confused. Already mildly annoyed that no one told him he'd be fighting skyscrapers with feelings. He draws his bow. Takes aim. And Porphyrion feels it. Now here's your quirky side note. In some versions of the myth, Porphyrion tries to assault Hera mid-battle, driven mad by lust. Zeus, ever the protective husband, this week, intervenes. But it's Heracles who lands the killing blow. If that's not dysfunctional family drama, I don't know what is. Historians still argue whether the involvement of Heracles was a later addition meant to insert a popular demigod into an older myth, or whether it symbolizes the cooperation between gods and humans in maintaining cosmic balance. Either way, the message is clear. Zeus cannot win this alone, and that terrifies him. The battle spreads. Poseidon hurls islands like frisbees. Athena shatters a mountain with a single shout. Hephaestus creates a war machine powered by magma. Even Artemis drops her serenity and shoots arrows that carve valleys. And the giants? They just keep coming. Because Gaia isn't fighting for victory. She's fighting for memory. For every wound her children suffered. For every time the sky pressed down on the land. For every silence that came after betrayal. You crouch in the middle of it all, storms above, fury below. And somehow, it's beautiful. Terrifying. But beautiful. Because this is what happens when the earth fights back. You're not standing on land anymore. You're standing on a battlefield shaped like a god's bad dream. Mountains tilt at unnatural angles. Rivers leap from their beds and gallop across the terrain like serpents unleashed, and trees split themselves in half, not from lightning, but from deciding not to grow here anymore. This isn't war. It's myth bleeding into reality. Above, Zeus rides a thundercloud like a chariot. his bolts flying faster than memory. He's furious, focused, afraid. For the first time in eons, he's sweating, not mortal sweat, of course. Divine sweat. It smells like copper and burned cedar. You duck as a flaming boulder hurtles. Overhead, Porphyrion is down thanks to Heracles, but that hasn't slowed the giants. Not even a little. Now it's Enceladus who leads the charge. He's got a mountain for a club, wrapped in molten chains. With each step, he scorches the ground beneath him, and with each swing, he tries to rewrite geography. He's not interested in Zeus. He's aiming for Athena, and she knows it. The goddess of wisdom and war braces as Enceladus charges. Her spear glows. Her eyes are sharp. You hold your breath, and in a flash she lunges, impaling him right through the chest. And nothing, because Enceladus, like all of Gaia's children, wasn't made to be beaten that easily. He rips the spear from his body like it's a toothpick. Athena stumbles. And then, from the side, another arrow flies. Heracles again, always late, but always lethal. It pierces Enceladus's leg, just enough to stagger him. Athena uses the opening. She hurls Enceladus backward, into a gorge that swallows his form whole. The ground closes around him, not dead, just contained. And right now, contained is the best-case scenario. Now here's a little-known fact. In some local Sicilian legends, Mount Etna was considered to be Enceladus's prison. Whenever the volcano erupted, the people believed he was turning in his sleep, still dreaming of revenge. Historians still argue whether these myths were meant to reflect real seismic activity, or whether ancient poets used volcanic terror to keep the memory of the Gigantomachy alive in the public mind. You move on, because the war doesn't pause for reflection. Ephialtes and Otis, twin giants, target Apollo and Artemis next. They coordinate, which is unusual. Most giants fight like chaos given muscles. But these two? They strategize. Apollo dodges the first boulder, barely. Artemis looses 3 arrows into Ephialtes' thigh. Otis hurls a tree. Apollo counters with a solar flare that melts the bark mid-air. It's ballet meets demolition derby. And still, it isn't enough. The twins advance unstoppable. Until, again, a human arrow interrupts. Heracles, panting, battered, grinning like a lunatic, lands a perfect shot between Otis's eyes. Otis falls. Ephialtes screams, and Apollo, wasting no time, incinerates him with a burst of divine sunlight. So bright it burns your retinas through story alone. You sit back, because this war, it's being won in moments. Not with strength, but with alliances. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. In one fringe version of the myth, possibly poetic license, or just an attempt to spice things up, Athena doesn't kill her giant opponents directly. She instead throws the island of Sicily on top of them. Yes, the whole island. Apparently, paperweights weren't dramatic enough. Meanwhile, Gaia is growing restless. You feel it in the way the clouds stop moving. The birds disappear. The insects go quiet. Gaia isn't just sending soldiers anymore. She's getting ready to intervene herself. Zeus senses it, too. He turns his gaze downward, not toward the battlefield, but toward the earth itself. And for a split second, you see it in his face. Doubt, because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not again. The Titans were supposed to be the last challenge. The world was meant to move on. Mortals were supposed to worship, and gods were supposed to reign. But the earth keeps remembering, keeps reminding, keeps fighting. And beneath you now, the ground is starting to glow. The glow beneath your feet pulses like a heartbeat. Slow at first, then faster, brighter. It spreads across the battlefield like veins of molten gold, carving through the soil, weaving an ancient sigil that no mortal hand could draw. This isn't magma, it's Gaia's will made visible. And now she speaks, not in words, in reality shifts. The air thickens, gravity tightens, clouds stop drifting. And for one breathless instant, Everything in the cosmos seems to lean toward Earth, like a child pressed against a window, watching something forbidden unfold. You glance skyward. Even the stars are watching. Gaia is done whispering. You fall to your knees. Instinct, not reverence, as a column of light erupts from the earth. Not fire, not lightning, something older, more elemental. And from it steps Typhon. Wait, what? You blink. You weren't expecting this. Neither were the gods. Even Zeus looks stunned. Because Typhon wasn't supposed to be part of this story. He's older. The god-slaying storm monster born from Gaia's union with Tartarus, part snake, part storm, all nightmare. He's not a giant. He's something worse. You shield your eyes. Typhon towers into the stratosphere, his 100 serpentine heads hissing in languages never spoken. Wings like thunderclouds unfold behind him. His eyes are volcanoes, his hands hurricanes. You think, if Gaia called him, then this isn't about revenge anymore. It's correction. And Zeus knows it. There's a pause. No one moves. Even the giants seem humbled. Porphyrion is gone, Enceladus buried. But Typhon? Typhon doesn't fight for siblings. He fights to end things. Zeus reacts fast, too fast. He calls down a barrage of lightning so blinding it sears through dimensions. The bolts strike Typhon, explode the mountain behind him, split a riverbed in two, and do absolutely nothing. Typhon raises one arm and catches the last bolt like it's a child's toy. Then he laughs. It's not a sound. It's a fracture. Battlefield explodes into chaos. Giants rally around him. Not as soldiers, but as witnesses. They know what Typhon is. They know what this means. And the gods? They panic. Hera pulls back. Apollo disappears in a beam of light. Hermes suddenly remembers an urgent appointment somewhere very far away. Only Athena and Heracles hold their ground. Barely. And Zeus? Zeus does something unthinkable. He flees. He bolts for the edge of the sky, where Olympus ends and reality begins. He runs not because he's weak, but because he remembers. Remembers the last time he fought Typhon, how he was torn apart. His sinews hidden, his breath stolen. How he only barely survived with the help of fate, luck, and a mountain being dropped on Typhon's head. You remember that, to Mount Etna, anyone. Here's your mainstream historical gem. Typhon was likely a syncretic invention, drawing from older Mesopotamian chaos monsters like Tomat or Humbaba. His myth represents not just opposition to Zeus, but the return of primeval chaos. In some versions, he even fathers the monstrous winds, the source of all destructive storms. You watch as Typhon chases Zeus across the heavens. The sky bends, the stars flicker, and you think, if Gaia unleashed this, she doesn't want a throne. Back. She wants to erase the whole board. Meanwhile, the battlefield below is eerily quiet. No more fighting, just watching. The giants kneel not in worship, but in acknowledgement. Gaia has played her final card. And yet, something feels off. Walk slowly through the ruined valley. The glow is fading. Not quickly, but enough to notice. Typhon's roars grow distant. Zeus is not yet struck down. You realize the gods aren't fighting back yet, but they will. And Heracles? He hasn't left. He looks up toward the retreating storm monster, then down toward the earth. His expression is strange, wary, but compassionate. Because Heracles is the bridge, mortal and divine, brutal and thoughtful, flawed, but trying. In Gaia, she sees him. She doesn't stop Typhon, but she watches Heracles closely. And that's your quirky tidbit. In some Orphic fringe myths, it's not Zeus who defeats Typhon, it's Heracles. Not through violence, but through reminding the earth of mercy. He lifts a stone that Gaia laid, herself revealing a hidden spring. Typhon hesitates. Gaia blinks. And the battle pauses. Historians still argue whether this was meant as moral metaphor, man tempering nature, or a late addition to rehabilitate Heracles as more than just a bludgeon with muscles. But whatever the truth, you now stand on a trembling precipice, because Zeus is gathering strength. Typhon is not invincible, and Gaia, she may have pushed too far. The world holds its breath. Above, Typhon coils through the atmosphere like a sentient hurricane, his countless heads writhing against the stars, each spitting smoke, venom, and flame. And yet he pauses, not from exhaustion, not from fear, but because something has changed. You feel it too. The earth is quiet again. Too quiet. Gaia watches, not from the battlefield, but from everywhere. She is the cracks in the rocks, the weight of the soil, the ache in the tectonic plates. She is still in stillness, for Gaia is rarely surrender. It's our Eclibration. Typho, for all his terrifying fury, hesitates mid-sky. His form flickers, yes. Flickers as if some primal part of him recognizes a crossroads, and you wonder, is it possible even chaos can doubt? Below, Zeus reappears, not grand, not triumphant, just present. He returns in silence, trailing thunder like shame. No quips, no declarations, just a look. One that says, I understand now. And that changes everything. You sit atop a broken column, watching the pantheon shift. Athena lowers her spear. Poseidon submerges his trident. Even Ares, dripping with bruised ego, stops flexing. Heracles approaches the smoldering center of the battlefield. Very place where Gaia's energy burst forth. He kneels. Not to worship, but to listen. The ground responds not with quake or growl, but with a whisper. A low vibration, like a lullaby hummed through bedrock. And in that moment, you realize, Gaia never wanted to win. She wanted to be heard. Here's your historical touchstone. In ancient Greek agricultural rituals, Gaia was often honored not with sacrifices, but with moments of silence. No drums, no chants, just the act of listening to the earth itself. Farmers would place their ears to the soil to predict weather, fertility, even fate. That was her power, not in fury, but in presence. And right now, her presence is everywhere. You glance toward Typhon. He begins to descend, not to attack, but to return, to fall back into the place from which he came. His heads turn one by one, each casting a final look at the gods below. There is no malice in his departure, only memory. He sinks beneath the crust, like fire being folded back into coals. Zeus. Exhales. In Gaia, she lets him. This is no truce. It's a ceasefire. You feel the shift as it happens. The giants pause in their forward march. Mimas, blackened by battle, turns and walks away. Ephialtes drops a mountain he'd been planning to throw. Even Enceladus, buried but restless, stills. The war isn't over, but the climax? That has passed. Zeus raises a hand not in threat, but in respect. He speaks low and slow. We will not forget. Whether that's a promise or a warning, you can't be sure. But Gaia seems to accept it. Because now the earth begins to heal. You walk through the battlefield as vines crawl through cracks. Ash softens into soil. The rivers return. The stars realign. One of the giants, possibly Clytius, bends down and places a single hand into the ground. And disappears. Not in defeat. In return, Gaia is reclaiming her children, not as weapons, but as roots. And here's your quirky fact. In certain late classical myths, it said the giants didn't die at all. Instead, Gaia reabsorbed them, scattering their essences into landscapes. Mountains, forests, islands, each containing the soul of a giant, still watching, still waiting. Historians still argue whether this mythic dispersal represents divine mercy or divine threat. Perhaps it's both. A warning that the earth always has more suns. More stories. You find yourself alone now. At the edge of a new silence, Zeus and the gods return to Olympus chastened, if not humbled. Gaia fades into stillness. And you? You sit, not to record or interpret or even survive, just to listen. Because you know what so few ever do. The earth remembers. It doesn't forget injustice, but sometimes it forgives. You awaken, though you never really slept, beneath a pale sky, over a world that feels quieter, not peaceful, no, just quieter. Like a child after a tantrum, still sniffing, still trembling, but spent. The battlefield is no longer a battlefield. It's a scar. Scars, you realize, are not wounds. They're memories that stopped bleeding. You walk across the cracked plain, where not long ago giants thundered and gods screamed, and mountains danced to the tune of vengeance. Now, the wind blows through shattered olive groves. The ash has settled. The air smells of stone, damp and old. In the distance, you spot Heracles, sitting cross-legged, elbow on his knee. He's humming to himself, plucking grass like it's a lyre. A mortal hero in a world of immortals. Too tired to boast, too wise to ask for applause. You nod to him. He nods back. Some stories don't need words. Up above, Olympus shines again, still tall, still smug, but humbled, at least for now. The gods have returned to their pillars and pools, their gossip and golden goblets. But something has changed. You feel it in the way Hera speaks more softly, in how Athena now pauses before offering judgment, in the way Zeus no longer throws lightning just because it's Tuesday. They remember. And Gaia withdraws. Not in defeat, not in shame, but in the way oceans retreat after a wave only to gather strength again. She's gone back to her dreaming. But she is not asleep. Here's your historical fact. In several early Greek creation myths, Gaia was considered the first and final authority. Even Zeus, king of the gods, was said to be subject to her will. Her prophecies could not be undone. Her justice, though slow, always came. Now mortals begin to rebuild. Not just temples, but stories. You hear the first songs of the Gigantomachy, already being sung by bards who never saw the war. Children reenact the battle with sticks and sand. Artists chisel half-true versions into marble. Priests argue over whether it was divine punishment or sacred correction. None of them get it quite right, but all of them feel it, and that's enough, because the point of myth isn't accuracy. It's echo. You pause at a shrine, crude, fresh, built from debris. It bears no name. Just a stone etched with a single line. The earth listens. You smile, because yes, she does. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some forgotten corners of Greek lore, there were festivals held to honor not just the gods, but the defeated titans and giants. Locals would pour honey into the ground offerings for the ancient powers, not to beg for favor, but to acknowledge the earth's pain. A moment of collective apology disguised as ritual. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincere, or just insurance old magic kept alive. Just in case the gods got lazy again, you keep walking, past where Porphyrion fell, past the place Enceladus still shifts beneath the crust. Past the stone where Heracles rested his bow, and you hear something new. Laughter. Not mocking, not vengeful. Childlike. Mortals building a new world on a foundation of fire, telling each other the stories you've lived through. Embellished, of course. Giants a bit taller, Heracles a bit handsomer, Gaia a bit more terrifying. You don't correct them, you just watch. Because myths aren't truth, they're reminders, and this one? It'll echo for generations. The days pass like ripples, quiet, soft-edged, but wide-reaching. You stay in the world, moving unseen, unheard. Not because you're hiding, but because the story isn't yours anymore. It belongs to the earth, now. To the wind that carries fragments of old names across barley fields. To the farmers who kneel before their seeds and murmur half-remembered hymns to Gaia, just in case. To the children who mimic Heracles in games and insist they too could defeat a giant if given the right rock. You pass through towns rebuilding. Temples, not grand ones, small practical ones. Shrines to balance and earth, and sometimes just the one who listens. There are no statues of Gaia, only trees planted in her name. You smile, because that's the point. She was never meant to be worshipped. Just remembered. And Olympus? It stands. Gilded and glowing, yes, but change. You see it in the way Hermes speaks less and listens more. In how Poseidon now waits before flooding a coastline. Even Ares' blunt, blood-smeared Ares hesitates before lifting his sword. Zeus sits atop it all, thunder in his hands, but not clenched this time. Cradled, as if he's learning to hold power instead of gripping it. You watch him from afar. He doesn't see you. He's too busy watching the world. Good. That means he's learning. Here's your historical anchor. In post-classical Greek literature, especially during the Hellenistic period, Zeus was sometimes depicted not just as a king of gods, but as a guardian of justice. Not because he changed, but because the world's expectations of power changed. Myths evolved. Gods matured, or at least pretended to. And Gaia? She is everywhere and nowhere again. You press your hand to a tree trunk. It hums softly, alive with old memory. Not angry, not vengeful, just present. That's the miracle. The giants may have fallen, but Gaia still breathes through every hill and hollow. Her vengeance never sought dominion. She never wanted Olympus. She just wanted balance. And you feel it now in the rhythm of a village drum. In the pause between thunderclaps. In the silence after a harvest. Prayer. The world knows better. Not all at once, but enough. Here's your quirky side note. There's a tiny island in the Aegean where the locals claim their ancestors descend from a giant who never fought. One who chose to lie down before the war, who let the olive trees grow through his ribcage, who whispered to Gaia, "Let the others roar, I will root." Every year, they hold a feast under those very trees. They say when the wind is right, you can hear his heartbeat beneath the ground. Historians still argue whether this island even exists, or if it's just a sailor's tale meant to entertain children and soften the fear of earthquakes. But you know better. You walk through that very grove. The trees bend ever so slightly as you pass, because you remember everything. You kneel one last time and press your palm to the dirt. It's warm. Not like fire. Like flesh. The earth. Still alive. Still listening. You close your eyes, and you whisper, "Thank you. Not for the peace. But for the story." Because what is myth, if not memory with rhythm? And what is Gaia, if not the rhythm of memory? You return to where it all began. Not a battlefield. Not a throne. Not even a mountain. A garden. The soil is rich, dark, crumbling between your fingers like old paper, filled with forgotten truths. Wild thyme grows in the cracks. Moss clings to the rocks. A lizard darts past your boot fearless, as if it knows no giants will stomp here anymore. You sit on the stone worn smooth by centuries of waiting. This is Gaia's true temple, not built with gold or marble, but with silence, shadow, and seed. You breathe in, and for the first time in what feels like an entire age, you don't expect thunder. Instead, birdsong. Distant, hesitant, but real. The world is no longer gasping. It's inhaling. You trace a pattern in the soil, a spiral, unending. A symbol of cycles, of the long, slow turning that brought Gaia to rage and then to rest. Because while the gods blazed across the sky with lightning and pride, the earth always played the long game. She waited. She endured. She reminded. You look up now and see the sky unbroken. No storm gods flexing. No serpent-headed giants cracking it open. Just sky. And in the sky, the soft shimmer of balance restored. Here's your final historical anchor. Ancient philosophers, Empedocles among them, argued that all matter was composed of four forces: earth, air, fire, water. But it was the fifth element, ether, that held the cosmos together. Some said Gaia was that ether in disguise, subtle, omnipresent, unacknowledged. The glue between the chaos, maybe that's all she ever was. The glue. You smile as a breeze lifts a few leaves beside you. You remember how those same winds once carried fire, ash, even gods. But now they carry something else. Possibility. You walk down from the hill as a child passes you on the path, holding a carved wooden figure, a tiny Heracles perhaps, with a slingshot and a crooked grin. You ask what he's doing. He says he's going to ask the ground for a good planting season, because his grandmother told him the earth remembers kindness too. You watch him kneel. He doesn't speak in ancient tongues. He just says, please. That's enough. You continue walking. The temples of the gods now far behind. The whisper of Gaia always near. Here's your quirky final tidbit. Some fringe archaeologists believe that sacred groves, those open-air places of worship with no statues, no altars, weren't primitive forms of religion, but the original temples. That maybe early people knew the truth. The divine was not in things built above the earth, but in listening to it. Historians still argue about it. Of course they do. They're human, but the soil doesn't argue. It knows. You reach the edge of a figo meadow as the sun folds itself into the horizon. Not vanishing, just resting. And Gaia? She does the same. Not defeated. Not forgotten. Just here. Always. Still listening. Still holding the weight of gods and men alike, still waiting for the next time she need to remind them. But not today. Today. The earth is quiet, and that is a gift. You lie down on the soft earth now, and the sky above stretches wide and silent. No thunder, no roars, just a gentle hush, like the world itself is finally ready to sleep. You close your eyes, letting the last echoes of giants and gods drift away. They belong to the past now, woven into the roots of mountains, tucked beneath the rustle of trees. The earth no longer rages, she hums. A low, steady song, a lullaby for those who remember her, those who listen, those who still kneel not in fear, but in respect. You breathe in. The scent of soil, of leaf and bark and time itself, settles into your chest. You feel smaller, and strangely stronger, because you are part of this cycle too. You, the witness. You, the listener. You, the quiet in a world too often loud. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your mind wander, not toward the stars, but down into the earth, into warmth, into stillness. Let the memory of Gaia cradle you like a stone worn smooth by years of gentle rain. Let it remind you that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that says nothing and waits. You're safe now, you can rest. The story will keep. And the earth? She's watching over you. Always.